Hey YouTube, this is Jacob Beach with the Preppers Bunker Outdoors. This is my beautiful wife, Mrs. Beach. We're here today to talk to you about Episode 3, Towns of Fear, from the History Channel's new show, Alone. Alright, so the third episode picks up right where the second episode left off, and that's with a bang with one of my favorite characters, Joe. Mariah, what did you feel about his situation?
Well, I feel like Joe's situation was definitely a bad one, losing such a key item in survival. I'm wondering, though, if he would have stayed around his area a little bit longer, if his ferro rod would have, came back in, pushed back in with the tide. I don't feel like he needed to tap out as soon as he did.
I know that if I was in Joe's situation, this is exactly what would happen. I would go home, I would start going through all of my gear, and I would find the ferro rod in my pocket and never tell anybody about it. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that would be my situation. One thing that I found that was interesting is that Brant hasn't made a fire yet, and he's still in it.
He's just been using the moss filtration.
Right.
I'm guessing.
My thing is, with $500,000 on the line, and also in the area that they're in, there's not a lot of industrial movement and stuff going on. Maybe try drinking that water. Try eating some raw food. People have done it and survived before. There's a lot on the line, but Joe was going through a lot, and it's definitely a difficult situation. It's definitely a difficult mental situation, especially when you put so much importance on that one tool.
Yeah.
And when that one tool becomes so important to you and then you lose it, really messes with your head. I'm going to have to say that so far, Joe's the only character that I felt bad for. I mean, it's really a bummer. And so I just, I wish that he wouldn't have lost his ferro rod, because it would be really interesting to see what he did later in the series.
Yeah, I was really shocked to see him go home.
I think everybody was.
Yeah, I was really shocked because I thought he was going to be one of the guys that's like towards the end, possibly even the winner. So I was surprised and sad.
Yeah, it was a bummer.
It is sad.
It was a bummer to see him go. So. Alright, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about Wayne. In the beginning of this episode, he found a dead bird, and he asked, the audience, or I guess in reality the video camera, what they would have done with the bird. And he was worried about other animals, predators, coming to where he was to get the bird. And I'm thinking in my head, you want that to happen, and you want to take advantage of that, make a trap. You are just given bait. So you want to lure animals in. That's, he asked us what we would do. I'm thinking a figure 4 deadfall, even if he only gets something as small as a squirrel that's curious, whatever the case may be, it could be something. So that was kind of a bummer. Obviously, Wayne had a little bit of a rough time in this episode. I've had a couple run-ins with wild animals, and the first thing that I was reminded of in Wayne's situation was when I was a child and I was scared, and I would think there were monsters in the room, and I'd hide under my blanket. Well, when I got older, I realized that if there was something in my room, the worst thing for me to possibly do would be to hide under my blanket, because then I can't see what's going on or defend myself.
Right. I'm
opening myself up to attack. And that's how I felt when I saw Wayne run into a shelter. In the film, I don't know how aggressive the bear was. Maybe it was super aggressive, maybe it was less aggressive, it really doesn't matter. The chances are, and I think that this has been evident and is evident through research, that the bear was curious about his camp and curious about him, probably wanted some food, but was not necessarily looking for him for food, or the bear would have had him for food. In a survival situation, though, when that's what you're fearing, first off, we've been talking a lot about spears. A lot of people have. So
Right.
far, nobody's made one, but we've seen some teasers of Sam using one. But what I wish Wayne would have done is, instead of running into his shelter, run out to that beach with a spear, with water to your back. A predator, even an aggressive towards human beings predator, in most cases will not attack someone who's cornered, because the most dangerous animal is always the cornered animal. On the beach, even at night, there's no shrubbery, there's no trees, there's nothing for it to hide behind. It knows that if it's going to come towards you, you're going to see it, and it's going to be a face-to-face showdown. That's not what any predator wants. And the biggest reason that I think that's the route that we should take is, in this specific situation, Wayne should realize that if he calls for help and taps out, it's not coming for 3 to 5 hours.
Right.
So if you're not going to get help for 3 to 5 hours anyways, that means that if you tap out and they come get you, and it actually did want to eat you, then you're going to be dead anyways. If it doesn't want to eat you, and you don't tap out, you're not going to be dead anyways. The fact that you called and tapped out will have no bearing on the situation whatsoever, except that you won't be in the situation again. So, I really wish that Wayne had stuck through it a little bit better. If your shelter is a tent or a tarp, do not run to it for safety. Kind of like a sleeping bag. A sleeping bag inhibits your ability to defend yourself. So if you're afraid and you go into your sleeping bag, you're basically just making yourself into a nicely wrapped up, defenseless little burrito. Bad idea. So I was bummed to see Wayne go. I would have liked to see some of his primitive weapons. And, but hey,
And something else I want to add, Wayne had said that he couldn't make a shelter. He couldn't find a good spot for a shelter. You have the entire woods. You have thousands of trees. And he said that there were no trees where there wasn't stuff in front of them.
Or obstacles or something.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that's brush and logs. And, well, if you find a spot that could be an excellent place to set up a camp, but there's a log or there's some brush, to me I feel like it's worth it to go through that effort, especially if he can move the log. If it's like this giant one that he can't move, then you gotta move somewhere else. But if it's brush that you can clear out and you can make it into an excellent place for shelter, your shelter is a key, that's your home. And I feel like that needs to be something that you put a lot of effort into. So for him to say, well, I'm just going to set up camp here because I can't find any other place, I feel like that's kind of lazy.
Well, I mean, if you have a tarp, I don't care where in the world you are, shelter is easy. I mean, and they got big tarps too. So at that point, I was really wondering, whether or not he had made, some of these shelters in more difficult areas. Because a shelter with a tarp does not take much. It just really doesn't. Now, a good shelter does. And some of these guys have made very good shelters.
Mm-hmm.
They're very nice and very complex. To make a simple shelter does not take much. And really, anybody who's working with a tarp probably needs to be considering that the shelter is a short-term shelter. They need to make it, it needs to be quick and easy. And they need to be thinking further in advance towards a more long-term shelter. So that was at one point where I started kind of wondering, like, well, I kind of saw this episode coming for Wayne, which was a shame. So Lucas found himself in a pretty unique situation out of all the contestants. He found some clay and had a pretty good idea of what to do with it. And it didn't work out. Mariah, how did you feel about Lucas's situation?
Well, he had an excellent idea to build a cabin, and he was going to use the clay for an indoor fireplace. Now, if this would have worked out, that would have it would have been awesome to see. And I think that would have been excellent. Like I was just saying, your shelter is going to be your home. So putting that amount of work into a shelter could be very, very rewarding. And I'm bummed out that we didn't get to see the indoor fireplace and the cabin. I'm wondering if he will still do a cabin, just without the fireplace. But he was saying that the fireplace was kind of the reasoning behind doing the cabin. We do know that he is going to have to redo his shelter, though. He has a canvas stretched up, and underneath is where he sleeps and his fire. With a storm coming in, though, he could tell that the canvas is not as waterproof as he thought it would be.
Well, and what's important about that is the way that he built his shelter. A tall shelter is nice, a tall shelter is convenient, it gave him a lot of room, but it's absolutely detrimental to everything's survival. You really, if you're going to build a shelter like that, you have to have a very low shelter. So what his tall shelter did was it caught condensation, and I believe that he most likely had rainwater coming in around the shelter and then dripping down and dripping on top of him. It's possible that his canvas was leaking, but not probable. With such a tall shelter, you really are not going to be that waterproof, especially up there in western Washington. So, with that being said, I was very disappointed when he found out that the clay was, as he put it, inferior, and that he wouldn't be able to use it to make his fireplace. I didn't like that he just gave up at that point on the cabin idea, and hopefully, like you said, hopefully he won't. But you started doing the work, make a cabin without a fireplace, and then you can figure everything else out in the future. People have been living since people have been living with a fireplace inside their house.
Right, and he was saying that with the cabin, it's 4 walls around him.
Give him safety.
So you're going to have that security. I really hope that he does go ahead and do the cabin, because like he said and what you said, he spent a lot of time and a lot of work chopping down those logs. So I really hope that he goes ahead and does the cabin.
The survival is all about your mindset, and we're going to see, I think, characters fail and continue to fail and quit when something goes wrong and they no longer want to deal with it. But these are the times where survival becomes about your mindset and your mind itself, because you really have to think outside the box and think of what other options that you have. And you can't allow yourself, in real survival, you don't have a satellite phone and you can't tap out. I think the winner is going to be the person who gets their mind into the right place, even if they're not the most skilled person. If they get their mind into the right place and treat it as actual survival, I think that's who we're going to see come out through it. The person with the best attitude, mindset, the most will, the person who wants it the most. We haven't seen a lot of Sam. We're starting to like Sam a lot better. Actually, Sam has become one of my favorite characters because what looks like him just being goofy at first, I think is really part of his personality that makes him strong for survival, is because he's able to make light out of situations.
Right, and the first episode of Alone, we got to see goofy parts of Sam, and I immediately liked him because he made a kind of a crummy situation into something that he was just enjoying himself. So I immediately liked him. I do want to see more of his survival skills come into play because I feel like he knows a lot. If you watch some of his casting videos, you can kind of see some of his skills that he has, so I really am excited to see those on the show.
I think they're holding back on a few characters because the guys who tapped out more early are getting a lot more showtime. So that way the people that stay there the whole time get to build their story from the beginning. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see more about Sam.
Yeah, me too.
So, Mariah, there's two people that we still know almost nothing about. The first is Dustin. He was talking about, spending long nights. The nights are getting longer. And how much is your time away from your family really worth? Well, the first thing that I think when I think of longer nights is more sleep. That's great. And then Brant still hasn't been able to get a fire, which it's impressive to me that he's still out there without having gotten a fire. And he said he's never been alone like this. That's about all we know about these guys, almost.
Right. And we can see kind of a trend going on here. The more these contestants, these guys, dwell on the fact that they're away from their families and they start analyzing themselves and they think about all the negative, they're affecting themselves mentally. I think that being that they know that it's damaging to them, but they still continue to do so, they still continue to analyze and to dwell on it and think about, I miss my family. I would try to focus on the task at hand. I would focus on what can I do right now to make this situation better. Whether that's fixing your shelter or going down and setting up a trap or focusing on making your survival situation better.
Yeah, no matter what the situation, we keep talking about this mental game. And whenever your life is difficult, even if you're not in a survival situation, the best way to make things better is to work. A hobby helps, all these other things help. But if you're having difficulty sleeping, difficulty doing anything else, hard work that's exhausting helps you with all of that. So, and especially in a survival situation, Alan talked about, it's just one more day, taking one day at a time. It's really what you got to do. And so, I'm hoping these guys don't dwell on what they're missing out on too much. I want to see these guys compete at their highest level, to have their mind in the game. Even Sam questioned why he's out there a little bit.
Yeah, he did. His core reason for being out there. And I feel like when he said he's going to keep us posted on that, so we'll see what he comes up with. But when you start to question yourself, or why am I here? Why am I doing this?
That's the beginning of the end.
Yeah, that's
not that we think that it's the end for Sam.
Right.
But it can really do damage. So, Mitch, Alan, and Sam, we're big fans. Watching a little bit of Mitch's YouTube channel from the past. Very capable. Hope he starts making some bows and arrows and I think that he's really going to come into a groove. He knows so much. Once he learns to apply that to where he is right now, he's going to do really great. So I want to learn more about all these guys. But we're, Mitch, Alan, and Sam. Hopefully pretty soon here we'll start learning more about Brant and Dustin.
Yeah.
So, if there's anything else that you'd like to see, mention, or talk about, comment on it, let us know. Please subscribe and like our video, share it with your friends, and we look forward to seeing you next week.